Hey there, my home office smells like Douglas pine. What's yours smell like? This subject's been on my mind for a while. It's been in a couple of conversations I've had. It's been in a couple of emails recently, one at 5 a.m. this morning, which led to this video, because I think I know why your church visitor quit visiting, probably. I'm not necessarily talking about church. It could be your mosque, your fellowship, your coven, your synagogue, whatever. What you attend, where they advocate for spiritual community or loving thy neighbor or joining a peaceful tribe or in some other way preach or advocate that people of goodwill should share their talents and resources, often to benefit the community. You know who I mean. That elderly widow that you saw, or the curious teenager, or the single dad or mom. Perhaps you noticed her little kids were kind of noisy when you saw them 2 or 3 Sundays in a row, or Saturdays, or Thursday evenings maybe, wherever you attend. That group, whatever it is, that you support philosophically and probably financially. I probably know why it might have occurred to you suddenly that we don't see them, or her, or him, because I'm them, I'm him, I'm her. I'm the person who attended 3 times in a row, probably not actually with your flock, but metaphorically. I'm not relating this because my feelings are still hurt, if they ever were. That's unlikely. I'm alienated. Could be this was my cousin, except obviously aliens don't have to look like that. I'm attempting to pass on some useful perspective, to be helpful to people who value a second opinion about how they seem, how they behave around outsiders. I'm going to give you one outsider's, one visitor's opinion. You probably understand that that might be the kind of second opinion you'd want to hear. If I can frame my own experiences, most of them from the past year, you'll understand at least one reason, maybe, why your church doesn't grow much, or why you know everybody who attends the temple so well because it's always the same crowd. Specifically, you should at least get why people keep disappearing. Once you know that, you can either decide that's how you like it, how your congregation or whatever is supposed to look like from the outside, or you can think better and develop new habits in accordance with what you teach or preach or say. Do you subscribe to both the first and second commandment? Or is your worldview all about the material world, not a theoretical spirit world? Whether you love your neighbor because Yahweh says so, or it just seems like a good thing to do, it shouldn't matter how it comes off, should it? Some people in your community have been socially isolated for much longer than you can blame COVID for. What's called social isolation should really be called physical isolation or distancing. We're all being encouraged to hook up with each other via social media, texting, phone calls, video chats. All of that is the opposite of being socially isolated. Social isolation is psychological isolation. It's knowing very few acquaintances well. It's when the only people you see all week are at work, who you barely know, or complete strangers while you shop. It's having a few friends, theoretically, but none who are both willing and physically able to help you move if you need it, or if they are, they're always busy. Social isolation is building up a list of cool things you'd like to tell someone, please God, anybody, but the list only gets shorter when you've forgotten something on it. Forgotten something may be very useful, but useful to who? You don't know anybody, or you've got friends sorta, but they are busy, or live too far away, or life happens like shite does, and naturally their families are the legitimate priority. Isolation is being lonely for so long, with nobody to talk to, you become acutely aware when you do have opportunity how much other people need to talk to, how little they're willing to listen, and you can't blame them because you're the same. You wish they'd shut up for 2 paragraphs and let you say something. Social isolation is being alone for so long you start talking to yourself. When people start doing that, it can easily become habitual. You start doing it while other people are around. It becomes a self-perpetuating cycle because most people see some weirdo talking to herself or himself. They assume that person has some untreated mental disorder like schizophrenia. But realistically, only about 1.1% of citizens and subjects on your planet have schizophrenia. 60% of them who have that disease are being treated. So, how many of those lonely self-talkers you've seen and tried to avoid were probably simply trapped in self-fulfilling loneliness? If your sanctuary or shrine or denomination or whatever invites community involvement, doesn't that imply an offer of some level of psychological or at least human support? Let me tell you what it looked like when I was seeking a tribe. My methods and expectations have changed since then, so please don't start emailing me offers to hook me up with your religion. I'm not emotionally involved anymore, but I am still concerned with the credibility of good people who may simply be ignorant and unaware. This is what this is about. I tried a few churches or church-like groups for a few years, some months longer than others. They were substantially different from each other because I'm pretty comfortable in all kinds of environments. For internal reasons related to where my head was at the time, way more than any external factors, those congregations didn't work out. I was willing to keep trying in the same way, invest months if necessary in a group, and do what I could to try to make contacts, have conversations, and somehow integrate. Uncle Albert Einstein was smart enough to figure out that energy equals mass times celeritas, i.e. the speed of light. It's possible he defines insanity as performing the same experiment multiple times, but hoping for a different result. If he's right, he was pretty sharp with figures, I understand. Then, one particular group I attended cured me of that insanity. I researched their website, started attending, and also, right away, wanting to become involved, attended a midweek class that the church sponsored. The class was specifically for single people with children, so I thought I might make contacts there, maybe friends in some future. Unfortunately, very few people attended, none of them consistently, except me. I don't fault people for having better options or obligations I know nothing about, so I was okay the evening that I was the sole student with two educators, but apparently it wasn't worth teaching just me. Instead, they both wanted to ask me questions about my life in order to jump to conclusions and start judging me based on their near ignorance. That was my fourth, maybe fifth, but final class there. I'd also been noticing I could go to their regular services early and stay late and stand around in their lobby alone and try to look like I would like a conversation, whatever that looks like, and be completely invisible. After that, I go a maximum of 3 times to any new group I was trying. If I was essentially the invisible lobby visitor all 3 times, I'd move on. I've been the one unknown person in several Sunday schools and evening classes. I volunteered my name when it was clear nobody was going to ask it. I know the subject matter in a Sunday school class well enough to ask good questions or contribute, but nobody ever asked anything about me. Several times I've watched a dozen or fewer well-acquainted church friends in a class who clearly knew details like histories and children's names about each other. I've seen them talk with each other while I sat in silence, wondering if anybody would notice if I just left. At least twice I did just leave once I realized I didn't give a shit if they'd notice or not. They obviously didn't care about me in any perceptible sense. Though there's thousands of useful metaphors in Hebrew and Christian scripture, most church folk only seem to know about a dozen or so, and the Good Samaritan is probably the most popular. That's why you already know enough about that story to get why a person like me might hear it and think, if I were beat up and lying in a metaphorical ditch, or even literally being abused somehow, none of these people around me care enough about me to even find out. I can't hear anything in church anymore about the Good Samaritan without wanting to puke a little. That literal physical reaction is not to the people who, after all, probably actually are living up to their capabilities. It's because I have a lot of respect for Scripture is all. I won't apologize if I seem harsh, because there's very little chance you actually know me. I have deliberately attempted to frame this issue as honestly as possible with appropriate emotion and psychological context so you know what it looks like to those who you might want to meet and learn about the next time you notice there's a visitor in church. Do you think people go out of their way, go to a strange church full of strange people because they want to hear the minister or the speaker, or more to meet the people? What do you think? Really? My name's Jim. Shalom.